puzzle together. The puzzle of life holds a beautiful picture, but it will only be visible when each of us takes his unique place in it. The ego feeling we are aware of now is only a shrunken vestige of a far more extensive feeling which embraced the universe and expressed an inseparable connection of the ego with the external world. Sigmund Freud, Civilization and its Discontents. When we meet up with a narcissist, the self-disorder referred to as narcissism in psychopathology refers to extreme selfishness with a grandiose view of one's talents and a craving for admiration. A narcissist is a person who is so self-centered that he cannot truly love anyone but himself. Narcissism as a mental health problem is what, in the psychiatric manual of illnesses, is called a personality or self-disorder. A personality disorder is an enduring, inflexible, and pervasive set of patterns of thought and behavior that are contrary to what is culturally expected of healthy people. It directly impairs one's ability to relate effectively with others, especially in the area of intimacy. This kind of illness is in one's character, so it's not fully curable, only manageable with intense therapy. Narcissism is a complex disorder with many causes. We can look at some possibilities in the early life of a person that may help us understand the origins of a narcissistic disorder. The person may have received too much attention and not enough limit setting, so now he's demanding and feels entitled to have everything his way. He may have had others do it all for him, manage his environment so as to promote his grandiosity, make life easy for him so he didn't have to take responsibility for his own life. She may have received inadequate attention or love. Her value was based on being what her parents demanded she be. This can lead to a deficit of the ability to trust others. With this is a sense of shame. There is something wrong with me. I can never measure up. All these are forms of wounding, since the child was deprived of the healthy limits and sense of agency, the essence of a healthy ego, that foster development toward adulthood. Wounds to a narcissistic ego might also appear in ways like this. I was always doted on and could do nothing wrong in my parents' eyes. I was never doted on. I was doted on and then suddenly was no longer, as might happen, for instance, when a brother or sister is born and displaces an older sibling. Any one of these criteria, or a combination of them, can lead to narcissism, a vain, grandiose sense of oneself, and an excessive focus on oneself with an insistence that others show continual admiration of us whether or not we deserve it. This is why a narcissist lacks empathy for others. His inability to love means he cannot sincerely provide the 5 A's of empathic love: attention, acceptance, appreciation, affection, and allowing, though he can imitate others who do so, and thereby fool people into thinking he is sincere. But whatever empathy he shows is a skill set rather than an authentic feeling. Likewise, love requires vulnerability and a commitment to closeness. Neither of these is possible for a narcissist. It's his fear of abandonment that keeps him looking for partners and holding on to them for as long as he can. He seeks having someone in order to fulfill a need for shoring himself rather than to achieve mutuality. Here are some of the telltale signs of narcissism: arrogant attitudes and behavior, an excessive sense of self-importance, a requiring of constant and excessive adulation or attention, a preoccupation with fantasies of grandeur, success, beauty, intelligence, including an inflated, delusional sense of one's attractiveness and intellectual or physical excellence, overestimation of one's desirability, success, or the value of one's contribution to a project, a belief that any success is based entirely on personal skill or effort and not on the support given by others or by chance or grace, a seeking of partners who have high status or who look attractive on one's arm, treating relationships as important because of how they serve one's self-esteem and not because they lead to closeness, a goal that is foreign and threatening, coming across as amiable but motivated by self-interest, a belief that one is extraordinary, privileged, one of the elite, in line for special favors, a sense that one is allowed to exploit or use others for one's own purposes, resulting in no respect for the boundaries of others, an envy of others or imagining they envy oneself, an inability to accept feedback because one's self-esteem is so vulnerable, which makes ego inflation seem continually necessary. An ego mindset, egotism, on the other hand, is one that thinks and acts in narcissistic ways, but not so extremely as in the mental disorder. There are differences between narcissism as a personality disorder and an ordinary big ego. The traits of egotism are shown by a narcissist in extreme, maladaptive, disruptive, and inflexible ways. Narcissism is rigid and fixed, pervasive, persistent, recurrent, and enduring, while egotism can be continually reduced. Narcissism first shows itself floridly in adolescence or early adulthood, whereas egotism can arise at any time in life. Both egotists and narcissists have grandiose views of themselves, but a narcissist is obsessed with illusions of prodigious success. An unhealthy ego mindset arises only in specific instances, for instance, threat, and can be replaced with a healthy ego mindset. Narcissism, on the other hand, abides in the psyche no matter what the circumstance. Both are compulsive, but the disorder is beyond full remedy, while an egotistical attitude can be remedied with practice. The narcissist can manage, but cannot fully change, whereas an egotist can. An egotist can care about others when not under the spell of selfishness. Egotism is a mindset that is turned on and off by whim or will. A narcissist cares about no one but himself, a character trait that cannot be turned off, only managed. Egotism can serve as a tool. Narcissism is a liability. Egotists can function well in social settings and in work situations. Narcissism disrupts social and job functions. Egotism interferes with the love relationship. Narcissism makes a love relationship impossible. Too small an ego. With an inflated ego, we might use egotistical actions to cancel or reduce our gnawing sense of shame and inferiority. We have a good purpose, but our style of achieving it is not appropriate. With a deflated ego, we might have a sense of guilt about acting with pride. This can make us tolerate or even seek humiliation. Our guilt about having any power at all can even make us want to be helpless. When our ego is deflated, we do not stand up for ourselves. We let others take control of our decisions. We are submissive or passive. We may project an image that is appealing to predatory egos that victimize or use us. We make excuses for the abusive behavior of others toward us or toward those we love. With such an impoverished ego, we'll be willing to walk on eggshells in a relationship, never sure if what we are up to meets the standards someone else has set for us. When the other person is angry, we become frightened and try to appease him. We learn to smooth over any ego-aroused anger so it will not erupt in ways that may intimidate or endanger us. We live in reaction to others' attitudes and behavior, rather than in accord with our own deepest needs, values, and wishes. We placate people rather than confront them when they threaten us. Our life is thereby restricted, inhibited, at the mercy of others' actions. We are willing to be humiliated rather than show strength. We do not believe we're worthy of respect, let alone entitled to it. Our self-esteem is so low, our healthy ego so deflated, that we can't imagine having a life that is truly free. We hold on to superannuated or untrustworthy friends. Our sense of obligation or history with someone takes precedence over caretaking our vulnerable hearts. We then feel frustrated with ourselves because we're bumping into our own overly accommodating style. In an intimate relationship, one partner may have a deflated ego. Since healthy relationships are egalitarian, submissiveness interferes with intimacy. A partner with an impoverished ego may believe she has a fear of equality in a relationship. She may believe she fears intimacy. But what feels like fear may really be her sense of obligation compelling her to remain unequal. The partner with a healthy ego will help the deflated partner become stronger. The partner with an inflated ego might take advantage of the other's passivity and exploit it to boost his own ego. In a relationship between an inflated and a deflated person, both, however, are acting their own parts. Here's an example. The deflated partner says, "I'm always the one who has to apologize." The other partner says, "I'm always the one who has to remind her of our agreements." The fact that one is the hero and the other the villain doesn't matter. Both are actors in the drama, a drama that can't continue without each staying in character. A person with a deflated ego can, in any case, become healthy through therapy, assertiveness training, self-esteem workshops, brain health techniques, and other practices. A deflated ego responds to psychological interventions and can engage in the work of addressing, processing, and resolving conflicts, both internal and external. We can learn ways to encourage others to act respectfully toward us. Standing up for ourselves is crucial. Revisiting the practice on working with fear you heard in Chapter 2 can be of help now in this crucial enterprise. The ego at ease. Just right pride. Are we arrogant for focusing on ourselves and showing ourselves to the world? William Blake wrote, "The pride of the peacock is the glory of God." We might say that the peacock displays his colors proudly, but knows they're a gift, not his invention. He lets us see the glory of nature, but also knows that only he can hold it in such splendor. When in early life or in some relationships, our needs and choices were unsafe to show, inappropriate or unwelcome in others' eyes, we might have hidden our colors. But nonetheless, in the backwoods of our mind, we still wanted to be ourselves. We might have been humiliated for our unique feathers. Now we can embrace our uniqueness as a gift that serves wholeness, the way the peacock does. His feathers are not like the medals on the puffed-out chest of a military tyrant. They are articulations of the vast variety of beauty in the natural world. The pride of the peacock is not showing off, but showing forth the brilliant possibilities of grace-giving nature. The pride of a healthy ego is just like that. The lawyer Atticus Finch in Harper Lee's story, To Kill a Mockingbird, presents a superlative example of a healthy ego. His character shows how someone can let himself be seen as a strong person, fully himself, but totally without an egotistical attitude. He stands up for and stands by others, but does not engage in revenge against those who have hurt himself or them. He doesn't compete because he respects others' skill and trusts his own. The Atticus Finch character does not have to prove himself because he has a self-confidence that matches his competence. His wholesome ego manner is based on principle, courage, and empathy, not on swagger or aggression. The fact that some surveys show Atticus Finch to be the most beloved character in literature tells us that deep down, we all know what integrity looks like, and we honor it. Bob Ewell is the character in the story who represents the dangerous underbelly of the ego. He's hateful, mean, out of control. His ego is arrogant, though he is ignorant. His ego becomes cruelly vengeful when he loses face. Atticus accuses Ewell and his daughter of lying. Saving face after this insult is so important to Ewell that he even attempts to kill 2 children. Bob Ewell is an example of how dangerous the ego can be. Indeed, it is the most dangerous force on earth, strong enough to kill love, end relationships, start and refuse to end wars. It can reside unnoticed in anyone, a hillbilly and a president, a criminal and a judge, a penitent and a priest, a neophyte and a Buddhist master. How can we be assertive without being egotistical? Soldiers stand when an officer enters the room. He then says, "At ease," and they relax. This is a metaphor for ego. It stands when necessary and relaxes when appropriate. Here are some ways we can demonstrate healthy pride and stand up for ourselves without egotism in the way. We have confidence in ourselves without an air of superiority. We consult our trustworthy, healthy ego about our choices in order to maintain our integrity. We notice and protest, but do not overreact to personal insult or betrayal. We never defend nor attack, only engage. We stand up for our rights, but do not retaliate when they are not secured. We stick to our guns, but don't fire. We respect others' rights and ask that they respect ours. We do not vie for position or engage in a pissing contest. We do not lock horns when someone's ego is aroused toward us. We are not overprotective of our turf, but we do safeguard our boundaries and rights. We can be bosses, but without being bossy. We're willing to back down when the circumstance calls for that, or when we're shown to be wrong or not knowledgeable. We never bully. We keep choosing the path of nonviolence. All of us would like to be good to others, and most of us would like to be relatively good in a good world. What is difficult is to be good in an evil world, where the egoism of others and the egoism built into the institutions of society attack us and threaten to annihilate us. Under such conditions, the only possible reaction would seem to be to oppose evil with evil, egoism with egoism, hate with hate, in short, to annihilate the aggressor with his own weapons. But is it not precisely thus that evil conquers us most thoroughly? For then, not only does it damage us exteriorly, but it perverts our very heart. Evil is overcome only by good, hate by love, egoism by generosity. It is thus that we sow justice in our world. To be just, it is not enough to refrain from injustice. One must go further and refuse to play its game, substituting love for self-interest as the driving force of society. Pedro Arrupe, S.J. Address to the 10th International Congress of Jesuit Alumni in Europe, Valencia, Spain, 1973. Practice. Look and see. We may sometimes go from day to day without much thought about what's going on. Then our life might become superficial or routine imprisoned. In such a circumstance, we might find ourselves at the passive deflated or the aggressive inflated end of the spectrum of ego. Both thrive on unconscious habit patterns. An ego develops in an appropriate way when we deepen our sense of ourselves and what we're up to. This happens when we look into what is going on or what has happened. Focusing this way is an antidote to the self-centeredness of the narcissistic ego. Narcissus, in Greek myth, stared only at his own reflection. This practice is reflection on the deeper meanings of ourselves, others, experience, and our life journey. We may also reflect on our motivations. Some of our statements show a sense of assertiveness, integrity, and strength. However, they can mask a deep egotism. The difference will be in the emphasis. Let's take two examples. A man says, "I pay my debts." When the accent is on pay, we hear a commitment to be honest. When the accent is on I, we hear a showing off with the implication that I am not like those other people who don't pay their debts. This second motivation, betrayed by an accent or tone of voice, shows the ego element. In another example, a hostess says or gives the impression that she wants us to cut short our visit. She does not want us to stay at her house much longer. We suddenly feel unwelcome. If our motivation is respect for her wishes, we might say, "Okay, no problem. I'll respect your need for space and move on." We then leave with no resentment. If our ego has become indignant, we might say, "I certainly won't stay where I'm not wanted," and leave in a huff. We'll feel resentful, and our pride makes us refuse to return even if invited back, our form of payback. Here's a practice of inquiry into what happens in us and to us. We ask ourselves what we feel and reflect on it. We delve into the felt sense of a happening, a choice, a predicament, a relationship. We honestly ask ourselves about our own motivations. Our responses to these inquiries show us how we are holding our experience and what it's really all about. It will also help us look into how much energy we have invested into having a particular conflict come out our way. We call ourselves on how our ego has become engaged, aroused. We let go of the ego charge, which sounds in our heads like this: "I have to win. I have to get my way. I'll be damned if I let him get away with this or get ahead of me." We know we have reduced our ego investment when we feel a release of stress because the issue has become just information. Then our energy in the issue is about working something out, not winning. It's about connection, not victory. That is, love, not ego. Regarding a choice we face, we ask questions like these. They're not meant to be handled cognitively, but with attention to and room for the feelings and bodily reactions that arise from each of them. How does this matter? How important is this to me? How does this reflect my values? Which of my needs is this fulfilling or not fulfilling? Is this relay of my needs and the responses I'm receiving from others reminiscent of childhood? What am I really up to in all this? What's my given motivation, and how does it compare to a motivation that might be lurking under it? Is this a metaphor for something much bigger that I have not yet discovered? How might this contribute to or debit from my personal growth? Does this move me along on or interfere with my journey? How much agreement is there between my heart, mind, and gut that this fits for me? Does this release and show the wholeness that is in me? Does it fit in with my integrity, my health, my conscience, my calling, my spirituality? With love as my life purpose, how does this help me be more loving and show it more abundantly? This practice shows how depth happens when we reflect about and inquire into ourselves, when we go beyond the superficial story to the subterranean meaning. Let's close with a simple and perhaps amusing example. In the story of the three pigs, we find no deep meaning when all we learn is the moral. In doing a project, use the best materials. We already knew that anyway. However, we might try a new version of this story. The third pig, the wise one, feels compassion for the first two as he takes them in after their houses have been blown down. He does this with no "I told you so." We admire his egoless generosity and wonder if we could be that big-hearted. Also, if, instead of killing the wolf, the three pigs were to convert him to the path of nonviolence and loving-kindness, so that they all became close companions, while he becomes a watchdog for the whole village, we would learn that the dark side could become an ally. We would begin to trust that this could happen between us and our own enemies. Both these realizations illustrate what is meant by depth, a path into the as yet unopened, still unguessed pageant of possibilities in our ordinary humanness. Chapter 4: Childhood and Ego. Relate to a life situation in the deepest sense, not from the standpoint of the ego that bemoans its fate and rebels against it, but from the greater inner law that has left behind its small birth, the narrow realm of personal outlook, for the sake of renewal and rebirth. Max Zeller, The Dream, the Vision of the Night. Building a healthy ego begins in childhood. There are three important gifts that a family, and later a relationship, can offer to aid in this process. 1. A secure base from which we can launch out. 2. A safe haven to which we can always return. And 3. A sense of enduring accompaniment by those who love us as we freely travel in both directions. The sense of home as a secure base is the A of allowing in the 5 A's. It ensures that we have the freedom to explore our deepest needs in the wider world. A safe haven we can always come back to enables us to have a sense of trust. We experience our family as a container, always open, always safely including all that we are for good or ill. In addition, when the world is difficult, we can come back to be comforted and nourished. A sense of enduring accompaniment is the outcome of ongoing support. It's the sense that our family members are with us even when they're absent, because we live in the locket of their hearts. We feel a support in being ourselves, rather than an insistence that we become what they want us to be. The accompaniment is unconditional, like any real love. All three of these gifts endow us with a sense of our own worthiness. To trust that people are willing and able to provide these gifts to us equips us to launch onto the life path that is a fit for us. The criteria for a spiritually and psychologically healthy childhood or relationship can be determined by asking this question: does it honor who I am, match my life goals, and lead me to more connection with others and with the earth? This is, after all, how we thrive as individuals and survive as a species. Each of us can ask ourselves, what in our life has helped us toward establishing our full self and staying connected to others too? What has been too narrow an alley between where we are and where we're going? Using myself as an example, I can say that I could not become the full version of David Rico living in the home of my parents in the New Haven, Connecticut of the 1950s, attending St. Patrick's Church, Skinner Public Grammar School, and later St. Mary's High School. Each of these communities meant well, but each had a repressive edge. It took me many years to let go of the self-negating messages I imbibed so that I could become at least somewhat more of who I am, though nowhere near in full authentication yet. In the 11th grade, I read Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, but I overlooked the bold veracity of these words of Elizabeth Bennet, the main character, to the repressive and imperious Lady Catherine. I am resolved to act in a manner which will constitute my own happiness without reference to you. But I can now say, in a way that resonates with the words of Elizabeth, I am here to create the life that is mine with whatever gifts and limits I have. My challenge is to improvise, not to obey. Can I open to this here and now, letting everything I encounter be my valued teachers? The important thing for me is that I don't give up on the ongoing project of self-becoming and don't hold anyone from the past to blame for my tardiness. Getting to be ourselves fully will mean breaking free of the confines in our conditioning so far. It will mean expanding our imaginations beyond the narrow boundaries we have lived in at home, church, school, and society. It will mean relinquishing the comfort zone provided by our sheltering routines and running the risk of trying something altogether new, at least occasionally. All this is a tall order, but what matters is that we never give up trying. We may have been at the mercy of our parents' egos, especially if they were autocratic, controlling, or fulminating at us from a bully pulpit. As a result, we may have come to believe that we were not lovable as we were, but only if we designed ourselves to fit their blueprints for us. We had to do what they wanted us to do and be what they wanted us to be. Maybe doing the wrong thing became the same as, I am bad. This is how guilt became shame. Along these lines, we can remind ourselves now that the parts of us that are appealing to others may have nothing to do with what our father or mother wanted us to be. Some of what our parents considered unacceptable may have had more to do with themselves than with us. For instance, our father may have said to us often, "You're hard to get along with." Translating that statement into the language of the controlling ego, he might more honestly have phrased it this way: "You won't let me control you." Today, we might say something like this about our now aged dad: "He was a terror in my childhood, but he has mellowed with age." This may mean Dad has seen the light and let go of his ego, so now he is gentler. This is surrender of ego in favor of mutual respect. Mellowing can also mean that Dad has less energy at his disposal and certainly no power to control or intimidate us anymore, so he's given up trying to activate his now impotent ego. This is surrender as acquiescence to the reality of powerlessness. I was proud of myself because after age 60, I noticed I had become less ego-reactive. I thought it was owing to success in my psychological work and diligence in my spiritual practices. Then I found out that our adrenal glands produce less adrenaline, the ego hormone, around age 60. So I felt more humble about my transformation. Now I know that my ego is no longer the captain of the ship of my life, but I also realize it still remains somewhere on board as a stowaway. Letting go of old programming. Relating to our past in a healthy way means that it does not disable us, but only prepares us for what life may bring. We are always heirs of the past, but we don't have to be victims of it. An imprint refers to the lasting consequence, remnant, or result in us of a formative experience. For instance, in grammar and high school, we may have gained the impression that a scholastic experience includes demands on us to study, observe proper discipline, and have our conduct continually monitored. All this settled into our psyches as the school imprint. Perhaps we entered college with that imprint in place, but then, within one day, realized that college has a whole different style. No one is scrutinizing us. Now it's all up to us. Our former school imprint disappears, and we begin to hold a new imprint of what education can be like. The imprint from childhood does not so easily evanesce. It lasts a lifetime and affects our adult relationships. We may still be trying to get someone to say something to us that we had hoped our father or mother would have said. We may still be waiting to hear the confirming word that grants permission to be all that we are. We may never have received it from our parents, so we carry the imprint that it can never happen. The early deprivation happened so often it became programmed into us. But for aware adults, there is hope. It can still and always happen in those motherly or fatherly moments that come to us from friends, family, or a partner. We don't expect such tender moments, but we certainly appreciate them when they come our way. We can also learn to give them to ourselves. In any longing for closeness, we are seeking one or all of the 5 A's: attention, acceptance, appreciation, affection, allowing. They were meant to come to us consistently from our parents. For some of us, they did, in which case we learned from how our parents loved how we could love ourselves. For a healthy ego to develop in us in childhood, we require the fulfillment of needs such as the 5 A's. Our missing out on them is the cause of our present wounds. The holes that our parent shaped in us become what we keep seeking from others, sometimes from those who fail at showing us love, just as our parents did. Our search for the missing love goes greatly awry when it turns into the style of grab and cling, what only leads to drama and disappointment. Most of us have noticed that we are acting on early programming most of the time. This is why simply gaining information doesn't help us change in any enduring way. Information is directed to our cognition, but our cells don't listen in. They work on past unresolved events from our life history and are not affected or impressed by words. Important changes in our personality don't happen in reaction to nagging questions. They happen in response to resolved questions. When there has been little or no mirroring, understanding, acceptance, and holding of our feelings in early life, we can find it hard to know what we are feeling later in life. Our needs represent ourselves. If there was little or no fulfillment of our needs, we can feel personally devalued. We might then seek fulfillment from adults who are too wounded themselves to come through for us. Our past can be a pre-existing condition as we face the present and engage in adult relationships. Can new events happen in our life without a referent to the past and its leftover hungers? Our obsession with our past and future frustrates and closes off the open space in our true nature. It is certainly hard to imagine our psyche as a hollow bamboo, when our sense of self is limited to our story, our memories, our imprints. We are captivated by the apparent refuge from here and now reality that repeating our story seems to offer. Emily Dickinson expressed the danger. How soft this prison is, how sweet these sullen bars. The king of down invented this repose. The fear-driven ego may seek rest in downy refuges from reality. The healthy ego has found ways to walk directly into an interpersonal issue or inner conflict, including those of childhood. For instance, regarding the unmet needs of childhood, we may do work like this. We grieve for how we missed out on the love we needed. We give it to ourselves now. We accept as partners only those who are willing and able to give it to us in reasonably satisfying ways. This leads to a psychological awakening, a building of ego strengths. In Buddhism, the path to awakening begins with taking refuge in Buddha, the enlightened life in us, in Dharma, the enlightened way we follow, and in Sangha, a community of friends and practitioners who support us in our spiritual practices. In spiritual or religious consciousness, we find a wholesome refuge in God, in a higher power, in nature, or in any resource transcendent of ego. Wholesome refuge-taking is not hiding out or being cozily comforted. It is finding and activating courage so we can face reality. A refuge gives us a sense of accompaniment in facing challenges, not an opportunity for full escape from them. When we are in a relationship, the unresolved drama left over from our childhood continues in new ways. We may say we want safety and security in our relationship, what trust is about. Yet we might be acting with a different agenda. We may be seeking drama and adrenaline, what ego thrives on. Our real agenda may not be closeness. It may be reenacting our parents' way of relating to us or to one another. Our agenda may be to keep repeating the dysfunctional style of our childhood. Here's an example. We criticize our partner with a snide remark. We suddenly recall that this is exactly what our own father said to us often, forgotten until this very moment. Our unconscious, our deeper self, is helping us grow by sending up a psychological health alert in the form of a memory. Our unconscious is pointing out to us our work, which, in this instance, is grieving over a form of mistreatment in our childhood. To turn on our spouse with criticism and blame misses the point and forecloses on an opportunity to do our own work. Our relationship agenda is, I'm carrying 100 pounds of baggage and looking for someone to blame it on. Instead, we can more responsibly say, I am carrying 100 pounds of baggage, and I thank you for helping me see some of it. Now, I want to find a way to work on myself that does not include criticizing or blaming you. Of course, the universe has joined in to help us, too, by the synchronicity of hearing ourselves say the exact words in the present that repeated those of the past. The following pairs illustrate two agendas regarding closeness. The first describes how truly seeking closeness means giving and receiving the 5 A's. The second describes how avoiding closeness happens when we show our partner the opposite of the 5 A's. Attention. Ignoring, dismissing, glazing over, switching the topic to ourselves. Acceptance. Judgment, rejection. Appreciation. Taking for granted, ingratitude. Affection. Maintaining distance, or wanting sex without offering real intimacy. Allowing. Controlling. The first set is the loving style based on our heart's response to our partner. The second is the egotistical style, based on the unhealed wounds we carry into our relationships. Practice. Healing the past that is still in us. Intense, seemingly unbearable feeling states in our present life are a signal of wounded child energy within us. We need then to know that we are no longer children, but adults who can love, protect, and hold the child within. We do this when we allow the child part of us to grieve its wounds as copiously as is necessary. Grief is allowing our feelings of sadness, anger, and fear. Our adult grieving is our own child tending. There is sometimes an overlooked element in our grief about how we were abused within a family. We might forget to grieve the loss of love. We may concentrate only on how hurtful or unfair the abusive parent was. But more was going on in the childhood scenario of abuse. The abused child was also in mourning for losing or missing the love that was her rightful inheritance. She was not only the target of direct abuse, she was being deprived of the caring connection that family life is meant to be about. Lack of love is the hardest part of our past to come to terms with. It calls for grief, and then a yes to the given of deficiency that was the only life we knew. As we experience our mourning fully, we hold our experience in a new way. We are not powerless victims, but survivors who are learning to parent ourselves. We are more likely to welcome our feelings when we trust our adult selves to handle them. Then, holding is not simply enduring, it is opening our hearts. All it takes is staying with our feelings of grief whenever they come up. They will arise on their own. We don't have to conjure them or try to make them happen. When the feelings arise in memories, relationships, experiences, or sensations of any kind, we allow them to pass through us like lightning through lightning rods. Then we notice that they go to ground. That is, are released while we remain standing and grounded too. This is what makes feelings safe for us now, feelings that may not have been safe in childhood when we had no resources or support to handle them. Emotional survival and self-parenting happen when we hold our ancient griefs, rather than let them grip and grind us. This is how they finally take their leave, so we can become present in the present. We also keep in mind that in major grief, there is an element of inconsolability. Some events in our lives were too overwhelming ever to be processed or let go of. Resolution then takes the form of surrendering to the given of inconsolability that some griefs carry. This is an example of how our work can proceed without the full sewing up of all the loose ends. Grief is our innate response to loss. When a memory of our childhood arises, and we feel a pang of pain, anger, or regret, we can bring the memory to the three feelings in grief: sadness, anger, and fear. We are sad about the love we missed out on or lost. This is how we work with our sense of loss. We are angry at those who deprived us of love, made our lives a hell instead of the heaven love can make it. This is how we work with our sense of the unfairness of the loss. We are afraid we might allow abuse in our present or future relationships, or never get over what happened to us in childhood. This is how we work with our sense of threat or scarcity. Regarding anger, we may not be angry only at our childhood caretakers. We may be angry at ourselves because we find that we are now like our parents, especially in how we act toward our children or our partner. We may be angry at ourselves also because we bought into our parents' belief system. For instance, if they pushed us too hard toward being successful, we may now be pushing ourselves in a stressful way to achieve more and more. We're angry that they conned us in ways that still pattern our behavior. Now, we're ready to look at the 6-step practice of grief work, a combination of feelings and shifts in response to a loss. 1. We ask, what was I sad about back then? What am I sad about now? Then, we let ourselves feel the sadness that goes with the memory. We ask, what anger did I feel back then? What or whom am I angry at now? We feel the anger. We ask, what was I scared of back then? What am I afraid of now? We feel the fear and assure ourselves that we don't have to act on it. We pause after each question and let the feeling or sensation have time to arise and last as long as it needs to. It will, with this permission from us over and over, on the heels of every memory, soon begin to fade and resolve itself. 2. We congratulate ourselves. I am now taking care of myself as an adult. I am committed to growth and doing all I can to cultivate it. 3. We state the gratitude we feel for the grace to have found and become ready to tackle this practice. 4. Eventually, we who mourn deeply and sincerely might feel a shift. A grace happens, and we begin letting go of ill will grudges, resentment, and the need to retaliate against our abusers. These 4 let-goes are the equivalent of forgiveness. Forgiveness that happens in us, not something we can cause at will. We can pardon at will, but forgiveness simply happens in its own time. We notice that forgiveness does not stand alone in human experience. It is always tied to a grief. Throughout this audiobook, we have noticed that an egotist finds it hard to forgive. He goes from being hurt to retaliating, rather than to feeling the grief that is the preamble to forgiveness. When we forgive, we do not excuse abuse, nor do we hate those who caused it. We genuinely hope they see the light as we move on with our own life. This shift frees us from obsession about what happened to us, an obsession that can otherwise keep us in the abuse and victim cycle forever. We do not soft-pedal the personal nature of our grief, but we do realize that there is such a thing as inherited suffering. We may grieve for how our mother did not stand up for us, or how our father raged against us. In grief, we may realize that we now carry our mother's fears, our father's anger. In healing grief, we show compassion to ourselves for how much of our parents' pain still abides in us. Since we are hurt or disappointed, not only by our parents, but also by other adults and ourselves, our full forgiveness can proceed in all 3 directions. We forgive our parents for any harm they have done to us. We mourn by feeling our sadness about what was lost or missing, our anger at those who deprived or hurt us, our fear that we will repeat the past. This grief is our own inner work, not a transaction with our parents in the present. We forgive others for how they have hurt us or betrayed our trust. We mourn by feeling our sadness about what happened, our anger at those who hurt or disappointed us, our fear that we have lost someone's love. This grief can be expressed to the other. We forgive ourselves for our misdeeds and mistakes. We do not let ourselves off the hook. Instead, we make amends wherever possible and thus clear the books. We resolve to change our behavior for the better. We learn from our mistakes. We begin to see all that we have done and do as opportunities for the practice of mindfulness and loving kindness. We forgive our parents. We let go what can interfere with forgiveness: ill will, an intent to harm or wishing harm, resentment, grudge, blame, revenge. Letting go of these is forgiveness. We forgive others. We say ouch and offer to open a dialogue. This response escorts a struggle into assertiveness and communication. We forgive ourselves. We let go of self-blame, shame, and self-criticism. Such letting go helps build self-esteem and generous love. 5. In time, we may realize that our story and the emotions that come with it are identical to those of so many others all over the world who have suffered as we did. We feel less isolated and victimized as we connect with them at a heart level. We find ourselves opening to a compassion that extends not only to us and to the characters in our childhood, but now also to those who suffer everywhere, both victims and perpetrators. After all, everyone in every story missed out on love, either in giving or receiving it. Such universal compassion is a grace, a shift into the spiritual, the healthiest destination of every experience that life sends our way. To clarify the terms in the practice in the preceding text, we can distinguish compassion from empathy and sympathy. In some dictionaries, they are virtually interchangeable. In contemporary spiritual teachings, we see distinctions like these. In empathy, your pain and feeling is in me too. I hold it, but don't necessarily do anything about it. Empathy permits distance. I stand here and feel your pain with you as you stand there. In sympathy, I see the pain in you and I feel sorry for it. I stand here and see you over there. With compassion, I feel your pain in myself. That is, with empathy. And I am sorry for it. I have sympathy for you. But in addition, I move from where I am to where you are so I can be present fully, actively, and helpfully. I am affected and effective. My response is participatory. I am with you, and you are within me. This is deep compassion at its best. 6. Finally, we remain aware of the given that compassion shown to others now, no matter how sincere, may evoke no response or may be rejected altogether. That does not stop us from feeling it, nor does it drive us toward pushing the other to respond. Someone's refusal to receive our sincere compassion only increases our compassion for him and keeps him